Hello and welcome to Disney Movie Investigation. If this is your first time, welcome. Each week we take a look at a different movie that is featured on Disney+. We take a look at the backstory of the movie, some interesting trivia about the movie, and what other areas within the world of Disney that this movie led to. So this week we are taking a look at the Disney+ original, Artemis Fowl. And we take a look at the movie that has been in development since 2001, and some interesting facts about how the popular novel became the movie. Also this week, stay tuned because we are continuing our exploration of Epcot in Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. And we look at an extinct attraction called World of Motion in Future World. We take a look at this popular attraction that looked at the history of transportation, and we look at full detail of the ride, as we will also take a look at what led to its closure to be replaced by Test Track. So sit back and enjoy this week's Disney Movie Investigation.
Amazing!
So like I said, we are taking a look at Disney's Artemis Fowl. And this movie was released on June 20th, 2020. And it was directed by Kenneth Branagh. And it is based on the novel by Elon Colfer. And there was no box office for this one because it was a Disney Plus exclusive. But the budget was $125 million.
Wow!
So in terms of the cast, we have Ferdinand Shaw as Artemis Fowl, Laura McDonald as Holly Short, Josh Gad as Mulch Diggums, Tamara Smart as Juliet Butler, Nonzo Anzia as Domovo Dom Butler, Colin Ferrell as Artemis Fowl Sr., and Judi Dench as Commander Julius Root. So in terms of the production history, this movie took a long time to hit Disney+. It originally was going to be a theatrical movie, but then COVID hit and Disney decided to release it as a Disney+ exclusive, but it did take a long time to get there. In 2001, plans were put together to make an Artemis Fowl film based on the adaptation of the novel. And Miramax Films actually announced the film with Lawrence Gutman assigned as director and Jeff Stockwell as the screenwriter. The film did remain in development until 2011, where no news was being released. And finally in 2011, Jim Sheridan was announced to direct, and Saoirse Ronan was attached to play Holly Short. Then it kind of sat in the realm of nothingness for a while. And then in July of 2013, Walt Disney Pictures announced that they would produce the Artemis Fowl film with the Weinstein Company, covering the events of the first and second novel of the series. Robert De Niro and Jane Rosenthal were actually signed on to the project as executive producers. And then in September 2015, it was announced that Kenneth Branagh would be taking over directing duties. And then Disney finally announced a release date for the film, that it would be in August of 2019. It would be released to theaters. However, Disney did remove the Weinstein Company from the movie following the scandal with Harvey Weinstein. So Miramax was no longer involved. And then the film was ultimately shot in England, Ireland, Vietnam, Italy, and Scotland. And like I said, it was scheduled to be released as a theatrical film in the summer of 2020. But unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of the theaters were shut down. And so Disney decided to release it as a Disney Plus exclusive. So that way they use it as a way to entice more subscribers into their Disney Plus subscription service. So in terms of the plot, Artemis Fowl is a young criminal prodigy, and he hunts down a secret society of fairies to find his missing father who had been kidnapped. And along the journey, he must use what his father had taught him to encounter whole new worlds of fairies, trolls, and dwarves. So a little bit of interesting trivia about this movie. The movie rights were sold to Disney actually before the book was even published. So Disney was highly confident that this would make a great movie for them. And then in the books, I've never read the books myself personally, but in the books, Artemis actually starts out as a villainous mastermind / anti-hero and slowly regains the sense of morality over the course of the series. However, director Kenneth Branagh stated in an interview that he couldn't envision audience unfamiliar with the books being feeling sympathetic or identifying with an 11-year-old Bond villain. So he chose actually to do the opposite, where young Artemis Fowl starts out as kind of sweet and innocent with a little bit of an attitude, and then he kind of develops his kind of moral compass swinging the wrong way. And then the film, like we said earlier, covers most of the first novel. However, it does incorporate certain elements from the second novel, like Artemis's father, Artemis Sr., launching a rescue or being kidnapped, and then Artemis Jr. Launching a rescue mission to save his kidnapped father. So that's in the second novel. So in terms of this movie, I think this is a great fantasy movie and a great example of Disney creating another world. So what Disney, I think, really strives in, and which makes me really love Disney movies, is that you're able to create a different world that you're able to escape into. And this is a prime example of you being into the world of fairies and then using the Irish tradition or an Irish folktales to kind of enhance that, which I think is really strong in this movie. And then it does keep you wanting more, and it's a beautiful setup for future films. I'm not going to tell you what the ending is because I don't want to give spoilers, but it does set you up for future movies. And I'm hoping that Disney plans to explore the rest of the novels, because I'd be really interested. And it actually makes me want to go seek out the novels itself, which I think is a huge, strong plus for these movies. It's a great family film. I think the whole family can enjoy. There's a little bit of violence, but it's not too bad. And then I like I said, I wonder if they're going to make the future films, especially given that this didn't unfortunately make any money other than their subscription services. But I'm wondering too that this would actually make a great Disney Plus series where you could kind of see Artemis and Holly Short explore different worlds as part of this novel series. But overall, I definitely recommend this film. I think it's a strong plus for Disney Plus. So that's pretty much it for Artemis Fowl. There wasn't a lot to it, but I think it's a great, strong addition to Disney Plus. And I think it's one of those things where, because it was a Disney Plus exclusive, it's a great bonus for it. However, Disney does plan on releasing it on DVD and Blu-ray, and it will be the first Disney Plus original movie to be featured on a DVD or Blu-ray. So I think that's cool. So let's move on to our bonus story for this. And this is the Epcot's extinct attraction, World of Motion. Located in Disney World in Florida, in Epcot. The ride was a humorous approach to look at the history of transportation. General Motors signed a 10-year sponsorship to agreement for the ride. And this was an opening day attraction on October 1st, 1982. The ride was designed by Disney legend Ward Kimball, and that's where a lot of the humor comes from. And guests would ride in a 4 to 6 person Omni-Mover vehicle, very similar to like the Haunted Mansion type ride. And the ride was a mixture between audio animatronic figures and projection effects. The ride was actually narrated by Gary Owens, who was a fixture of the 80s. And the ride actually had a theme song titled It's Fun to Be Free, and that was written by Disney legend Ex Atencio. The song would be played throughout the attraction, and it would change styles based on the time period that they're in. This is very similar effect to It's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, where they would change the style of that song throughout the Carousel Progress. So very similar effect. So in terms of the actual ride, so the ride would start with guests going up into the deck portion of the building just above the entrance, and then it would make a U-turn and travel inside of the show building. So to give you a general idea, the ride building itself is almost like a big circle with a big cutout, pie section cutout in the middle of it, and that's what the entrance is. And the ride itself would go around the building and then come out the other side. So the first scene that guests would encounter would be a caveman cave, where guests would be introduced to the first form of transportation, foot power. Guests would see a caveman and a cave woman blowing on their hot feet, and kind of a humorous take on the Flintstones there. And then the next scene that they would cover would be boat transportation. And guests would see people traveling on projected boats where a man has fallen asleep and a crocodile lunges at him. Then the guests move on to animal power, and guests would see an eastern tableau where man is attempting to control zebras and camels, and as well as right above, a man would be on a flying carpet holding a crystal ball. And then the next form of transportation would be the wheel at Babylon. And the gag shows that the inventors are showing the king different types of wheels. One shows a square, one shows a triangle, and a pentagon. And then finally, the eventual winner shows the circle. Riders then pass by a wheel factory where guests can see how wheels are used, such as rickshaws and chariots. And then lastly, before they move on to the next form of transportation, they see a chariot dealership where a salesman is trying to sell a slightly used Trojan horse. Guests would then go to see a gallery of ships where a boat is being chased by a sea serpent. And then we would go on to flight, where guests would see Leonardo da Vinci trying to make use of his flying machine with a frustrated Mona Lisa looking on. And then the last area of flight would be a hot air balloon over London. And then we would move on to steam power. And this section would mostly take place in the Americas. And they would see a Mississippi riverboat along with a locomotive with a train robbery being stopped by the sheriff. And then guests would see the first local traffic jam, which featured an upset horse, a spilled ice truck, and kids screaming and laughing. And then the final scene before we get into the future area of the ride, guests would then hit the open road, passing a bicycle, a family picnic, and vintage cars, which would eventually lead to modern cars. And then the last scene would include a speed tunnel that would use projections to show how transportation was used in 1982. And then the last exhibit would be the Center Core, the City of the Future, which was used a very similar model to Epcot. And then guests could see them, much like in Spaceship Earth, they could see themselves using a future car. As the ride finished, guests would exit into the Trans Center. And this was an exhibition center sponsored as well by General Motors. And it was very similar to ImageWorks in the Imagination Pavilion. And this exhibit offered attractions such as designing prototype cars, the American Wind Tunnel replica, and a show called The Water Engine, which pitted 9 animated characters debating on what was the best type of engine for their car. So a humorous kind of show showing the different types of engines. So this ride was very, very popular. It was one of the signature attractions of Future World. So the question is, why did it close? So business began to slump for GM, General Motors, after the sponsorship contract ended in 1992. And GM began signing 1-year contract extensions to sponsor the ride. They didn't want to go for the full 10-year extension, so they would add 1 year after the other. And then one of the Imagineers suggested that they update the ride and the entire building be gutted, and that they focus the ride only on car transportation. GM liked this idea because it would be a way to promote their new cars. And so this is what eventually led to Test Track. And I'm going to go into that and do a separate video. But Test Track essentially is still sponsored by Chevrolet, which is a division of General Motors. And so World of Motion eventually became Test Track. So that's pretty much it for this week's Disney Movie Investigations. I hope you guys enjoyed this little history lesson of World of Motion, as well as a deep dive into Artemis Fowl. My question for the week is, what do you guys think of Artemis Fowl? Did you read the books? Like, how did you think it compared with the movie? And then in terms of World of Motion, what was your favorite memories of the ride, if you did ride it? Please leave a comment in the comments down below, and I'd be definitely interested to hear what you guys think. So in terms of next week is going to be one of our movies featured on Disney Star. And our first movie of the Disney Star series is going to feature WWE superstar John Cena in the movie 12 Rounds. So thank you everyone for joining us here on Disney Movie Investigations, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.